I'm Elvin and I'm 12 years old. And what's a witch hunt?
My name is Alison D'Amario. I'm Director of Education at the Salem Witch Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. The Salem witch trials are an example of a witch hunt. And sadly, there have been many witch hunts since 1692 in Salem. At the museum, we offer a formula for a witch hunt. Fear plus trigger equals scapegoat. And to explain it, if there is a prevailing fear in society, if everybody is worried about a particular factor, and then an event takes place to make that fear grow, very often people look around for somebody or a group of people to blame, to scapegoat. Here's an example, the Salem witch trials. During that time, in 1692, people were very afraid of God. The Puritan God was not a kind and loving one. They were also firmly believed in the devil and were very afraid of his power as an enemy of God. When Dr. Griggs, the man who came to see Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, looked at those little girls and said, "The evil hand is on them, they've been bewitched," people heard that. There were only 500 people in Salem Village, and they heard what the doctor said. That spread around the village very fast. So the fear that already lived in people's minds and hearts grew. And the result was an attempt to identify who was doing the bewitching, punish those people. Then it was hoped that life would go back to normal. And in the case of the residents of Salem Village and the surrounding towns, they hoped that God would then approve of what they had done and protect them. Another more recent example of a witch hunt is our treatment of Japanese Americans after Pearl Harbor. In 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor by surprise. One of our reactions under orders of President Roosevelt was to arrest Japanese Americans, 120,000 of them, place them in internment camps. They were all living in California, Oregon, the state of Washington, in the fear, of course we were terrified after Japan bombed us, and the fear that these people had their allegiance to Japan rather than to this country, even though many of them were born here. The fear also that they would do acts of sabotage or in some way compromise our defense system. So that fear prevailed and people were treated in this manner. It wasn't until 1988 that an official apology was issued to the people who suffered under this order. Obviously, their ethnicity was part of this treatment because they looked Japanese. They were Japanese American, and Japan had bombed us. So they were scapegoated. Another more recent example is the Mccarthy anti-communist hearings. At the end of the Second World War, there were people who were very worried about the rise of communism in this country. And Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin held hearings to identify communists in the labor unions, the entertainment industry, the army. If you were called to testify, your name could appear, depending on how the hearing went, on a blacklist, which meant your career was finished. An exception to that, of course, is Arthur Miller, who was called in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, another group that was attempting to identify communists. And he wrote his thoughts on his treatment in the 1950s in The Crucible and placed the action of that play back into the 17th century in the Salem trials because there are parallels between the two. One of the most obvious parallels was if you were questioned in either of these periods, either the witch trials or the McCarthy hearings, you were asked if you could identify other communists or other witches, and depending on your own personal situation, either you named names or you did not. Another example we include is the fear of infection, which of course is always with us. Nobody wants to become ill. When the AIDS epidemic came to this country in the beginning of the 1980s, the first victims of it were the gay community, and some people made that into a moral issue as well as a medical one. we understand much more about AIDS now and wouldn't target one group for something that could affect anybody. So that's how a witch hunt works, and that's why I think the Salem witch trials, although they took place over 300 years ago, are very relevant because they serve as a model for that particular kind of behavior.